The future is one of social engineering. Well, the present is also a product of social engineering, and much of the past has been shaped by the efforts of social engineers. Ever since the beginnings of true mass media, through television, film, radio, and now the internet, there has been efforts to socially reshape the masses. This is the new science of propaganda. No longer are we influenced mostly by speeches and posters. Instead, we are shaped by the media we consume, primarily. The news media plays a large part in this, alongside Hollywood and television. Music also shapes our views and opinions, as another example. At large, art influences our culture to a great degree because we spend most of our time indulging in these modern forms of art. One may say that art actually reflects society's values and cultures, and I would in some ways agree. On the other hand, it is used to shift the Overton window, to introduce ideas, and to instigate. Since media still has to make profit, of course it is limited by society's demands. Yet the window is still shifted, slowly but certainly, allowing the ideology it intends to promote to become more obvious, less subtle. Before this window shifted, it was simply a matter of being subtle, really, and knowing what boundaries were there. The news media, Hollywood, and mainstream media as a whole are all owned by only a handful of corporations and companies. It is clear and obvious the classes of celebrities, directors, news anchors, and the corporate elite at large have clear expectations. Like any other class or group throughout society and throughout history, there are expectations that the people of these class, the people of these circles, will adhere to certain values, to certain beliefs, to certain ideologies. One will not survive as a traditionalist in Hollywood. Take Mel Gibson, for example. He has only just started to make movies again, though most of his films require much heavy lifting on his part. He is a true outlier, but he also has his demons, for anyone who mingles in that industry will clearly find themselves surrounded by temptation and sin. With the recent sex scandals, it is even more clear that Hollywood is rotten. It is a world of its own, a concentrated bubble, yet it has so much influence on the rest of the world because this rotten tree bears the fruit of film. A rotten tree cannot produce good fruit, and I say this as an avid fan of movies, yet as one becomes observant, they can understand that many of these films do not present a message, Christian or traditional, but instead are either brooding with the esoteric symbolism, leftist ideology, and New Age spirituality. The wave of passive Gnosticism and spiritualism, so common both online and offline in these days. These films espouse these values, these very progressive, very modern and postmodern ideals. What I mean by it simply being a matter of being subtle, as I stated earlier, is that a lot of these older films and movies that we will hark on as the sort of nostalgic golden age of film, of actual good film, when it was truly an art, compared to today, is that both modern movies and movies from back in the day do espouse, like I said, these elements of leftist or progressive ideology, and New Age sort of Gnostic spirituality, this vague modern spirituality, anti-organized religion sort of spirituality. You will see these things in old movies and new movies. The only difference is that these new movies are much more corporate. They have a lot less art actually behind them, and they're chock full of very obvious forced diversity, multiculturalism, and just progressive values, because they do not have to be subtle anymore. The Overton window has shifted to the point where this current generation accepts things such as homosexuality, mass sexuality in general, right? And New Age concepts of spirituality. There is less traditional people and less traditional viewers. They can get away with it. It is no longer a risk at their profit to sort of push these things in, to make them obvious, to sort of make it so that You do not have to really even dig into these movies to see the ideas and the ideology that they're promoting. This is especially clear with the leftism, the social leftism, the progressive values, stuff like diversity and multiculturalism, and the seemingly racial quotas that these movies fill, female main characters, minority main characters, and there is nothing wrong with making a movie that has a female or minority lead, but what they do is they make it apparent that the only reason the lead is a female or a minority is for that aspect alone. And a lot of times with female characters, they try and make them masculine. They try to take a male character but make that character female. And this relates again to what we see in society now, which is the emasculation of men. Men are made feminine. Women are made masculine in a sense. It is a reversal. It is inversion. And this really just wrecks everything. It really wrecks how people are supposed to work by this complete destruction of gender roles and gender norms and gender expectations. Again, this relates to the greater goal of a destruction of tradition. One example of how old movies or older movies still fall into this is just the prominence of sex scenes, pornography, stuff like that you just see throughout most films. It's very obscene, and these scenes can be done without that sexuality being very open and in your face, but the reason they do this is they want to normalize that open sexuality. They don't want sexuality, they do not want that act to be reserved to marriage, to the bedroom, between man and woman bond in holy matrimony. They don't even want it to be private, really. They want it to be public. So they do this where they have scenes that are very sexual in nature when you do not have to show that to illustrate two characters having sex or anything like that. It's unnecessary, but they do it anyway because one, sex sells, and two, it aids in this subversion of society where now stuff like pornography is so widely accepted. Masturbation is seen as normal. And you can really see how stuff like that might not be the main reason or the main factor why this has happened, why we've seen this shift in morality, even though morality does not change, but the subjective morality of society, we've seen this shift, not entirely because of things like that, but you can see how that plays into a subversion of a moral value and how it is part of this big chess game to sort of crush and destroy and shatter tradition, the tradition that all societies are built on. Now, one might think that this is all silly and that there is no way there could be a unified agenda behind this subversion. Yet, media is a powerful and reasonable tool for propaganda. Yuri Bezmenov, great example, was a former agent of the KGB, and he came over to America, and he really talked up America, obviously. He wanted refuge here. He wanted to get away from Russia and the Soviet Union. But what he showed us was shocking to people. His testimony was shocking. Intelligence agencies were not investing in spies and espionage as much as one would assume. The reality was not Hollywood. It was not James Bond, right? Instead, the KGB had been financing efforts of social and cultural subversion, not gadgets and gizmos for secret operatives. This proved more effective than any spy. Because if you can have a profound change on the society and culture and politics of a nation, and you can use that to instigate chaos and instigate civil strife and unrest, then you can use that, as the Soviets did, to be able to roll in as Mr. Liberator, as the guy who saves the day, as the guy who brings in order. And the leftist idealists, the Marxists that we see in America today, and really in the West at large, that are very idealist about their egalitarian Marxism, Yuri described as useful idiots. that, if the Soviet Union were to have instigated a big uprising in America and swooped in as a liberator, as a bringer of order, they would have lined these people up and had them shot. Now, of course, KGB, social and cultural subversion, is much different than what our CIA would do, but let us quickly look at the CIA and the allegations that they were seeking to develop mind control. And numerous theorists propose this, and they'll assert that through MK Ultra, the CIA developed methods to hypnotize poor, unwitting patsies into committing political assassinations. Sleeper agents is usually a good term for this, right? Yet this is ridiculous. As Jay Dyer, great guy, his channel and his website will be linked in the description, has said on this topic, assassins exist. Hitmen exist. If the CIA wants someone dead, they can just hire a hitman. This is so obvious. Under scrutiny, this whole claim becomes silly. They might have dabbled in it just a little bit, right? But the greater goal is true mind control, which is social engineering. If the masses can be controlled through mass media, or at least subverted, influenced, sort of shaped into something that the social engineer wants, right, through any form of subversion possible, is this not the equivalent of mind control, really? So it makes much more sense that the CIA, like the KGB, invested in true mind control tactics, that of cultural and social subversion, of utilizing media for propaganda and social engineering purposes. Really, the deal is that if you just look at mass media, you look at TV shows, you look at films, you look at the news, you look at a lot of what the masses consume. You look at a lot of what you would see in universities. You will notice that there are a few clear, unified agendas or really accepted sort of changes, sort of ideas. And these are usually socially left, socially liberal. They involve the destruction of tradition, the destruction of true morality. This is why there is such a promotion of homosexuality and such a promotion of divorce and of mass sexuality. The sexual liberation, as they'll call it, or the sexual revolution, was not a liberation or a revolution at all. It was a form of social subversion and social engineering to create masses that sedate themselves through mass sexuality, to destroy, really, the family unit, which is what we have nowadays with so many broken houses, so many broken families. People don't use that term anymore, but no, a single-parent household is a broken household. It is a broken family. Then you have the new sort of spiritualism. You have atheism, and then you have modern spiritualism, which is just Gnosticism. I mean, when you have people who will respond in a religious debate with a quote from Star Wars, I think it's very clear that films and mass media have become a new mythology and have influenced people in a spiritual sense. My friend Johnny, who I've had on this channel before, when we were talking about transhumanism, told me that he was arguing with some guy about, morality, about Christianity, and one of the dude's responses was, only a Sith deals in absolutes. And that's so funny, that's so silly that somebody would bring up a quote from the Star Wars prequels in a religious argument. But it kind of shows you that people take these things a little too much to heart. All right, so I was looking for the visual content for this video. I was on Google Images, and I was reminded of this thing that we found, me and Johnny, when we were having that conversation. And I just want you to look at this image. And just look at the watermark at Sir_atheist. That's the most Reddit thing in the entire world. This image is the embodiment of Reddit atheism. This is the funniest to me. This is the funniest thing. Anyway, back to the scheduled programming. The Matrix, when I first watched it, had an effect on me. It made me think in the Gnostic mindset. Now, I'm going to link this guy, MrStosh or MrStosh, whatever. He has a good video series on the Matrix as sort of a trap and the Gnostic, Hermetic, very kind of bad sort of spirituality that it's trying to sell, and also how it is attempting to create a false and fraudulent counterculture. And I'll go over this in another video, but there are two countercultures right now. There's leftist counterculture, which is a fraud. It's corporate, it's fake, it's been produced as a way to sedate the masses, I'd say. And then there's actual counterculture, which is us, traditional reactionaries, right? That's the actual counterculture. That video is down in the description. Before we conclude this video, you might think that the whole idea of a sort of concentrated agenda or unified agenda of a certain group of people that is making efforts to subvert and to change cultural and social norms and to destroy tradition and to sort of spread their ideology through the form of mass media, you might think that's silly, you might think that's far-fetched. And I agree, I don't think that there is a unified, evil, elite, shadow council that gets together and makes these plans, and they got like pie charts and they got PowerPoint presentations on what's going to work the best. No, my argument is that we are dealing with a class of corporate elite that, as I said before, has certain expectations, and they have certain things that they believe in and values that they all share. And they have their disagreements and they butt heads, but they still have these things in common that allow them in their positions to push an agenda that is slightly unified. It is a connection of circles and of groups and of societies. It's not just one. Anyway, please leave what you think in the comment section below. This has been a video that's really kind of different than anything I've done on the channel. And a lot of it has been because I've been reading stuff like Huxley's Brave New World, which I'll have a video on fairly soon. And I've been listening to Jay Dyer's podcasts and videos, and he's a very smart guy. His stuff is linked in the description. And if you don't believe me that these films have some of these messages and themes, specifically of esoteric symbolism and sort of Gnostic scientism, transhumanist religion, then go check out some of his videos, some of his content. He really shows you that there are underlying themes in these films. Anyway, this is a big topic. This video hasn't gone over everything. Most of it was unscripted. I did script a bit of it. You're probably going to notice what is scripted and what is unscripted. But I really would like to see how well received this is so that maybe we can make this a channel not only of history, but also of matters of sort of modern day issues. From my perspective, from a Christian perspective, a guy who's got a major conspiracy theorist dad, and I don't say that to sort of diss him or anything. He's a very smart guy. Maybe one of these days I'll have my own dad on the channel because he has really taught me a lot, and I have a lot to teach him because he's not religious. Well, anyway, if you're here now, you've watched the video, thank you, God bless you, and I hope that you've learned something or you've been inspired to sort of think about things in a different way, specifically mass media, to consider the world from this viewpoint. And if this video is well received, we're going to have more videos like this, sort of in between talks about history, theology, and just what I generally do on this channel.